I discovered priests living in rotting human skins for 20 days, their haunting secret awaits. I never should have opened that door. The chill crept up my spine the moment I turned the handle. A creak echoed through the inky darkness, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I felt a heaviness in the air, thick and suffocating, as if the very shadows were watching, waiting that why life was mundane before this. Just another day, running errands, dodging the annoying drizzle that fell outside. I was driving home, the radio softly filling the silence, when I noticed a flicker of light coming from an alley. Intrigued, I parked. Curiosity pulled me in, against my better judgment. The alley was narrow and littered with forgotten remnants of lives lived. I stepped deeper, my shoes squelching on the damp ground. The smell hit me first, a rotting combination of decay and an iron-like tang that made my stomach turn. In the dim light, I saw them, shadows flitting against the brick walls. Whispers brushed my ears, soft yet unsettling. I leaned in closer, straining to hear the words, but only snippets floated back, prayers, chants, imploring tones that chilled my bones. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the fragile quiet. My heart raced as I whipped around. There was something there, or someone. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I pushed through the fear that gripped my chest. I had to know. Had I stumbled into a secret? Was what I heard true? My mind whirled with the possibilities, priests skinning the dead. The thought skated across my consciousness, gnawing at my sanity. That I glanced at the door at the end of the alley, a promise of answers. The frame was cracked and warped, almost as if it were alive. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob, my stomach twisting with dread. The air grew colder, heavier. I could almost hear the faint cries of the lost souls trapped within, begging for release. As I pushed it open, a gust of wind surged past me, screaming in protest. I stumbled inside. The darkness engulfed me. A single candle flickered, casting monstrous shadows across the walls. I caught fleeting glimpses of grotesque images, hide stretched taut, faces twisted in agony, all remnants of those who were. A bone-chilling whisper curled around my senses. Welcome. Then came the noise. Low, rumbling chants intermingling with the hiss of breath. My heart thundered, every instinct screamed to run. But I couldn't move. Something was pulling me deeper into the darkness, nearer to the truth lurking in its heart. Then, it happened. The door slammed shut behind me, locking me in. The cold seeped into my bones as the shadows shifted. And then I saw it. A figure emerging, cloaked and looming, the faint light dancing across its features. A scream tore from my throat, but it felt swallowed by the abyss around me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure slowly advanced, its form shrouded in shadows that seemed to writhe and twist, much like the figures in my nightmares. A hood cloaked its head, obscuring any identifying features, but I could feel its gaze piercing into me, unblinking and cold. My breath became a fragmented gasp, desperation clawing at my throat as I scanned the room for an escape. The only illumination flickered weakly, casting frenzied shadows that danced menacingly against the walls. Come closer, the figure beckoned, voice smooth yet laced with an unsettling authority that drew me in, against my will. The chanting had grown louder, resonating like a heartbeat in the gloom, and I could almost see the presence of others lurking just beyond the periphery of the candlelight, silent witnesses to whatever wicked ritual unfolded. Who are you? I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper as I stumbled backward. The foul stench laced with something acrid had grown so intense, I almost gagged. It wrapped around me, pushing me down toward the ground, suffocating any chance of flight. The figure swayed, and the shadows convulsed. You seek answers. You are not here by chance. Answers? I echoed, my mind racing with questions that tangled like weeds through my thoughts. What did I stumble into? With a graceful movement, the cloaked figure leaned forward. The fabric shifted, revealing a glimpse of flesh beneath a grotesque sight, the contours marred by stringy pieces of skin resembling shredded parchment. It was a haunting image that sent bile rising in my throat, but I could not look away. My horror intensified as the figure spoke again, revealing gnarled teeth, sharp and glistening in the dim light. Yes, the truth lies within these walls. Divinity intermingles with darkness, intertwining fates beyond your comprehension. The creature extended a skeletal finger, pointing to the far corner. I followed the gesture, trembling as my eyes landed on a makeshift altar rising amid the shadows. Littered around it were remnants of what was once human, skin, bone, and artifacts that seemed to belong to forgotten lives. Worship, it hissed, the word curling around me as if it were alive. We are the conduits of sacrifice. Each skin tells a story, each sacrifice is a prayer. The heavy silence that followed was interrupted by a sudden rustling. From the altar, figures began to emerge, some draped in human skin, others adorned in scraps of cloth stained red with what I prayed was only paint. They stood in a grotesque imitation of reverence, heads bowed, mouths moving in unison, a devout congregation echoing their master's chants. An involuntary scream clawed its way up my throat, I felt the walls closing in. I backed away, panic surging as I stumbled over a discarded skull, the hollow eye socket staring up as if to witness my unfolding horror. I turned, searching for the door, but shadows danced around me, whispering promises of despair, the chittering of souls caught in purgatory. Stay, the figure commanded, voice dripping with an ancient power. The temperature in the room plummeted as I felt a pull, a supernatural force rooting me to the spot. You must learn the truth. Before I could process the depth of that proclamation, the ground beneath me began to tremble. The candle flickered violently, the shadows contorting with almost sentient ferocity. As the chanting rose to a fevered pitch, I felt a presence, an overwhelming force, shift in the air. The walls began to pulse as if alive, drawing me in, and voices screamed in a cacophony of anguish. Waves of terror rolled over me as I caught sight of something deformed rising among the figures, a grotesque, elongated shape, limbs twisting unnaturally, its mouth stretched wide in an eternal wail. It lurked at the edge of the light, a nightmare come to life, gearing to break free, and as the candle sputtered out, plunging me into suffocating darkness, I heard it, a voice that was not my own, whispering through the void, "You are one of us now." In that oppressive silence, I felt the weight of many eyes upon me, the promise of the shadows just a heartbeat away from consuming me whole. My breath quickened as the shadows moved in closer, and then the last flicker of light vanished. In that pitch black, alone, I realized the truth: there was no escape. And then, a guttural roar pierced the silence as the floor beneath me fractured with a deafening crack. I was falling, spiraling into the abyss as darkness clawed at my skin, and amidst the tempest of chaos, I felt something wrap around my ankle, pulling me deeper. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating shroud, my body's descent into the void seemingly eternal. The roaring that had fractured the silence was drowned by my gasping breaths, each one labored and heavy with the weight of despair. A sharp tug on my ankle sent waves of icy shock coursing through me, and I clawed at the air, desperate to grasp onto something, anything, to halt my fall. The sensation of claws, cold, slimy, and relentless, wrapped tighter around my leg, yanking me downwards, urging me toward an unseen terror. My heart thundered against my ribcage as flashes of fluorescent memories flitted through my mind, laughter, sunlight, and the comforting embrace of familiar faces now fading into the shadows. And then it stopped. I was jarred abruptly, colliding with the damp ground, the impact driving the air from my lungs in a burst of pain. Instinctively, I scrambled to my feet, the remnants of my previous surroundings swallowed by the unyielding black. I could feel the foul moisture of the earth beneath me, the pungent scent of decay clawing its way into the back of my throat, threatening to overpower me. That I stood there, trembling and disoriented. Slowly, the edges of my surroundings sharpened, and the pervasive darkness began to fold away. Flickering light sparked to life in fits, revealing grotesque murals on the walls, twisted faces entwined with brambles of desperation, screams frozen in time, lifelike yet horrifying. Each visage seemed to twist in agony as if to plead for release. I staggered back, horror washing over me anew. The reality of what I had stumbled into was written in blood and artistry, each stroke whispering secrets of lives sacrificed to them. My breath caught as I turned, trying to decipher the room or whatever it was, this new layer of purgatory. Shadows lurked in every corner, and something inside me knew they were not mere figments of my imagination. A low keening sound echoed, vibrating through the ground, like the mourning of 1,000 souls woven into one sonic theme of despair. The noise braided itself into the very walls, reverberating through my bones. "Welcome," a voice crooned, the tone unsettlingly sweet, like honey tinged with a bitter aftertaste. It seeped into my mind, commanding attention. I jerked around, the shadows shifting to reveal a figure stepping forward, sinewy and gaunt in nature. It was draped in a patchwork of human skin that was impossibly stretched, merging one body with another, an artist's canvas of flesh. Its eyes glinted with a malevolence that sent waves of bile rising again. "You must be the new offering," it sighed, the sound sending shivers down my spine. The figure tilted its head, and as it did, the walls seemed to pulse like a beating heart. "You are in the sanctum of our beloved brethren. We gather here to commune, to renew the stakes each day, a cycle of devotion and sacrifice. Your essence shall ignite the fires of our rituals." My vision darted wildly to the grotesque figures that moved silently in the periphery, their heads slowly rising to meet my gaze, hollow eye sockets filled with a hunger that made me take an involuntary step back. They were more than mere witnesses, they were active parts of the horror, each oozing with the horror of their existence. "No." My voice wrenched itself from my throat, desperation coating each syllable. "I want to be part of this." The robed figure advanced a step, and I could smell my own fear mingling with the fate that surrounded us. "But you already are," it hissed, eyes glinting with hunger for my spirit. "You have entered our world, and now you will nourish our need." With that proclamation, the walls convulsed again, shadows pulsating as if blood coursed through them. There was a deep, resonant chant rising within the cacophony, a chorus of distorted voices beckoning me closer, each syllable tightening the grip around my heart. Just when I thought I could flee, a piercing wail erupted, and the ground trembled as the adjacent wall cracked wide open, a maw gaping in the darkness. From that void, twisted hands erupted, clawing for me. Frenzied faces appearing with hollow screams, eyes filled with pleading despair. Panic surged through me and I turned to run, my heart pounding against the chaos enveloping me. The shadows surged forward, eager to drag me into the unfathomable depths, to the tender embrace of whatever horror lay beyond. "Flee if you can, but you will return," the voice called, a haunting promise that chased me as I bolted. The pull of the darkness was almost magnetic, urging me backward, my feet slipping in the muck of that accursed ground. Just as I neared an exit, a sliver of light breaking through the madness, I felt them emerge, those warped figures surging forward. I could hear their voices, a menagerie of wails and laughter wrapping around me, beckoning me to join their ranks. And then, grasping hands collided with me, scrabbling at my arms with unrelenting urgency, pulling me away from the light. A scream tore through my lips as I was pulled backward, crashing down into the darkness and the abyss yawning wider around me, my chest bared to the gnashing of teeth and hollow laughter. In that moment, a single thought broke through, the realization that this nightmare would not end. The shadows had claimed me, and before I could scream again, a familiar voice echoed close against my ear, "You will never escape." As I surrendered to the darkness, I felt the gnashing teeth press against my throat. It all vanished as the light swallowed me, and I realized that perhaps I was already one of them, the lost, the damned, condemned to live in the horrors I had barely begun to understand. I was tossed into a churning sea of shadows, whisked away from the fleeting light like a leaf consumed by a cyclone. The echo of my own scream filled the void, swallowed by an unnatural silence that felt both oppressive and hungry. I struggled against the forms that clawed at my limbs, feeling their cool, clammy grips entwining around me like serpents, squeezing tighter until I could scarcely breathe. My mind raced, teetering on the edge of a nightmare that was far too consuming. Where now? An eternity felt like moments as I was dragged deeper into the cryptic unknown. And then, abruptly, I was released, unceremoniously dropped onto a creaking floor cloaked in darkness. I gasped, bracing myself against the splintered boards, the damp chill creeping into my bones. It was then that I sensed them, almost before I saw them, figures orbiting in the periphery, barely discernible yet exuding a palpable presence. Their broken whispers floated through the air like ashes from a dying fire, fragmented utterances that merged into a sonorous chant, layering over one another in a maddening harmony. Awaken, they invited in a mix of urgency and despair. Join us. I scrambled backward, driven by an instinct stronger than fear, yet my escape was thwarted by the oppressive weight of despair that hung in the air. The very atmosphere seemed to clutch at me, dragging me deeper into its depths. I caught my breath, forcing my mind to focus on the shapes around me. They were not mere shades, but grotesque parodies of humanity, twisted forms that bore grotesque semblances to those I once knew, faces contorted into expressions of yearning and sorrow. My God, the realization hit me like a blow, leaving me reeling. Their bodies looked as if stitched together from bits of flesh torn from unfortunate souls. They moved without purpose, like puppets whose strings had been severed, yet their eyes, those hollow, betraying eyes, held a certainty as if they recognized me. Before dread could root itself deeper within me, the chanting escalated, and the figures vibrated with a fervor. They began to encircle me, their bodies pulsating with a rhythm that made the hairs on my arms stand at attention. The singing melted into a dense fog that reached inside me, stirring something long buried, a flicker of recognition, a dark nostalgia that sent me spiraling into chaos. In that pulsating grayness, I thought I glimpsed a face I knew, my mother. No, it couldn't be. The visage was distorted, stretching and quivering, yet the familiar warmth of her presence flickered like an old film reel desperately trying to play through frayed tapes. Help me, her lips mouthed, but the sound that emanated was not her voice. It was hollow, filled with chilling echoes from those around me. The specters advanced, their arms outstretched, a macabre invitation. Panic tore through my chest. I stumbled back and collided with something hard and unyielding. I turned, only to find a crudely carved altar bathed in darkness, thick with a rancid shimmer that glinted against something within strings of hair. Tattered scraps of flesh hung like macabre offerings, beckoning me to pay penance for trespassing. The figures filled the space, closing in with a determination that set my heart racing. Their mouths moved incessantly, forming a barrage of sound that roared at me, a voice insistent with recognition and malice. This is your belonging, the price you must pay to unveil the truth. Stop! I screamed, rising from a primal instinct to escape. Get away from me! But my words were swallowed in their hymnal cries, morphing into an anguished scream that reverberated through the hall. Then, as if my will had inadvertently set off a chain reaction, the very ground began to tremble, shaking beneath my feet with growing urgency. The altar quaked, and I watched in horror as it splintered, revealing a void beneath it. A dark chasm opened like a mouth hungry for souls. Skeletons entwined with sinewy roots grasped at the edges, beckoning me into their embrace. And suddenly, the air grew thick and suffocating. I felt the figures around me pulling, their skeletal hands clawing at my clothes with fervent desperation, dragging me toward that gaping mouth of despair. With one last burst of strength, I threw myself away, crashing into the nearest figure, only to collide with something tangible, a chest. My hands grasped at a woolen fabric. I had stumbled upon a cloaked one, standing ominously still. I dared to look up, and there stood a hooded figure, a sentinel in the gloom. In that moment of frozen time, the chanting ceased. Silence enveloped us like a shroud. The hooded figure unraveled its cloak, and a surreal glow emanated from inside. The descant eyes of the forgotten were lit with anticipation. The shadows surged around me once more, shackling my limbs and drawing me towards him, as the words slipped from the figure's lips, "You have brought oblivion to this place. You must choose now for all awaiting." My heart stuttered choice. It hung precariously in the air as the abyss beckoned again, teeth gleaming like diamonds. In that moment of despair, beholding the intertwining horror ahead, dreadful uncertainty swallowed me whole. All the truths I had searched for were entangled in this tapestry of anguish, and I could hardly comprehend my fate. The sudden flicker of light began to dim, leaving only shadows to embrace me, and then, everything went dark. When the darkness enveloped me, it wrapped around every sense like a suffocating shroud, stinging like ice against my skin. My body floated aimlessly, lost within a hollow void that whispered sweet promises of oblivion while tethering me to a far distant reality. The fear began to morph into something else, something primitive and instinctual, thrumming against my bones like the distant echo of a heartbeat, but then a light sparked against the encroaching shadows, thin and tenuous. I blinked hesitantly against it. As it expanded, it revealed a wide chamber, the walls dripping with a thick, viscous slime that mirrored a dark history etched into the stone. The glow pulsed ominously, beckoning me closer to the center, where a grotesque tableau lay sprawled upon an altar that seemed to breathe, its surface undulating in a sickly rhythm. The hooded figure loomed nearby, now clearer in the sickly glow. The cloak that enveloped him was woven from strands of hair, some long and tangled, others short and coarse, intertwined with what appeared to be desiccated flesh. It was ghostly white, a contrast against the blackness that festered all around, and for one abominable moment, I wondered if these were the remnants of those who had once threaded through this hell. "Please," I whispered, my voice strained but desperate. "What do you want?" The figure inclinated its head, the shadows falling away to reveal hollow sockets where no eyes glimmered, yet I felt their weight, their dreadful gaze piercing into my core. "Oh, seeker of truths," it intoned, the voice echoing like multitudes converging into a single chilling hymn. "The nexus of fate is upon you. You are not merely a witness, you are the vessel, the catalyst. Your choices shall rip apart the veil binding this world to ours." From behind the altar's staggering crafting, figures began to emerge, more of the husks, clad not in fine robes, but in tattered remnants of despair. Their skin hung loosely like oversized garments, as if the very spirit had vacated their forms. Each step toward me sent forth a chorus of cracked laughter and moans, an audience of wretched souls expecting the play of fate to unfold. I stepped backward, heart pounding painfully against my ribs, as beneath the altar churned a deeper, darker void, a pit that writhed as though alive, its gurgles echoing in a twisted symphony of hunger and agony. As the figures drew closer, I caught fragments of conversations, long forgotten prayers and incoherent chants escaping their broken lips. It was as if, painfully, their words strung together a narrative bestowed with unimaginable torment. I reached for a tether of sanity, clawing against the spirals of horror, then from the very ground beneath me, a voice began to rise, low and throaty, pouring forth like an old phantasm caught in an endless loop. "We are the roots of your salvation and damnation. Your own blood mingled with ours, we are one. The secrets nourish us, strengthen us, give us life." How could this be? An unthinkable horror tightened in my throat. "No!" I cried, shaking my head in feverish denial. "I refuse to believe this. I'm not like you." Desperation clawed at my mind as fragmented memories congealed around the truth, smothering me with dread. Then I felt an unsettling tugging at my being, a dark curiosity drawing me toward mysteries hidden and long buried. I stared into the gaping pit, where an organic mass undulated with grotesque shapes that intertwined, tendons and sinews branching out like pulsating roots in a macabre garden. And from within this grotesque bloom, a flicker of something caught my eye, a face. Caught like a moth in amber, the visage was unmistakable, framed by a wild tangle of hair. It was the last glance of my mother, the twisted source of nightmares now stretched out like a grinning mask. "Release us!" she screamed without sound, a silent plea that cracked through the fabric of my mind. With it came the flickering shadows, the figures surged, chanting again for me to embrace my fate. "Join us," they chanted, their voices entwined like serpent coils, insistent, hollow. All echoing the same undying demand that I turned to flee, resolved to escape this wretched reality, but the walls around me began to shift. The chamber distorted as new forms emerged from the shadows, darker, more primal horrors. I had walked unwittingly into a web woven of nightmares, and each retreat seemed more futile as they unfolded before me, malice dripping from their jagged claws. "Choose." The figure rasped, its voice churning with ancient authority. We cannot linger. The price for knowledge is your essence. Will you pay? Frantically, I looked toward the shifting faces in the pit, those longing, wretched forms clamoring for liberation. Would I risk my very soul for the faint flicker of truth, or would the abyss claim me instead? As the darkness compressed, I felt the whispers converging, an orchestra of horror reaching a dissonant crescendo, and in that moment, a ghastly clarity struck. I was anchored between two choices, one against the sweet call of darkness, and the other, an acceptance of a void that would consume even the light rooted in my essence. The shadows pressed closer, pulling at my very foundations as I screamed, caught in the tempest of existence. My skin prickled as I stood at the precipice of irrevocable choice, and then the ground beneath me cracked wide open, the pit yawning wider, hungry, and then nothing. The echo of despair rang empty as I teetered on the edge of either fate, the shadows swirling violently around me. What lay beyond that treacherous brink awaited my final decision, but the darkness pulled at my soul, whispering promises of lost love that threatened to envelop me whole. In the throes of panic, a powerful surge arose, and the walls closed in with a cacophony of angry cries, dismantling reason in one final crushing gasp. Then I plummeted into the nightmarish maw of the unknown, my last shred of hope flickering as the abyss swallowed me whole. The choice was all but made, but the truth remained locked beyond the darkness, awaiting discovery or utter annihilation. The void released me in a shuddering exhalation, a chaotic plunge sending me crashing onto a damp surface that rippled beneath me like flesh. I lay gasping for breath as whispers coiled around me like a noose. The overwhelming scent of decay filled my lungs, forcing bile up in a revolting tide. Opening my eyes, I found myself surrounded by grotesque visages frozen in expressions of eternal agony. The wall behind me was lined with them, bodies attached to the stone like macabre trophies, remnants of forgotten worshippers. Their unblinking eyes appeared heavy with despair, pleading silently for release. Their gaunt faces, skin slick with a miasma that glistened in the faint light, warped and twisted into a grim tableau. I had not merely fallen, I had been absorbed into a deeper chamber, one that throbbed rhythmically, pulsating as if the very stone had a heartbeat. The air grew thick and serpentine, stretching taut around my throat, suffocating my cries before they could escape. I staggered to my feet, hands brushing against the clammy walls. The walls pulsed back, a grotesque mimicry of life itself. A semblance of clarity tried to piece itself together amidst the chaos in my mind. I was here because of a singular choice, a decision that was neither free nor entirely voluntary. The hollow echo of the hooded figure's words rang in my ears, resonating between a wakeful dread and a slumber of disbelief. We cannot linger. The price for knowledge is your essence. Before I could gather my thoughts, the shadows shimmered and a figure emerged from the darkness, coalescing from the edges of my vision. It was a woman draped in tattered robes that clung to her emaciated frame, her hair a wild halo of black, streaked with grays. The twisted countenance was both familiar and foreign, fragmented memories crashing over me like waves, each fragment blending with nightmare and reality, until I could not discern which was which. "Mira," she whispered, her voice threading through the stagnant air like a prayer, "the eldritch ones are near. You must get out. They feast on your fears." My breath stalled at the recognition embedded in her tone, my mother's voice, the voice of the woman I had lost, now intertwined with the malevolence that lurked within this cursed space. "Mom." The word cracked under the weight of my disbelief. "Look at what they've done." She pointed toward the altar where grotesque figures writhed in the dim glow. "You cannot trust them. They twist love and hope into a sickening ritual of despair. You must not become one of them." I struggled to comprehend the fear laced in her voice against the terror surrounding us. Why had I not understood that the horrifying reality of their existence was rooted in more than mere malevolence? They were once human, perhaps even loved ones, twisted into vessels of dread through some unfathomable bargain. The shadows flickered, momentarily revealing the outline of the hooded figure's monstrous presence loom above the altar, its skeletal fingers twisting in an intricate dance, calling forth another set of horrors. "You cannot escape your blood, dear one. They are bound to you as you are to their wretched fates." With a sudden burst of courage, I lunged away from the suffocating presence of my mother, tearing myself from whatever hold this place had on our connection. I took off running through the damp chamber, the walls humming with voices as they murmured lost prayers of forgotten souls. The energy pulsed against my skin like a sinister heartbeat, guiding me toward what I hoped might be a haven from the dark, but the air thickened further, and an oppressive weight bore down on me, pulling my limbs like anchors, dragging me back toward the pit of horror. I tripped over a protruding root that slithered from the flesh-like wall, falling hard onto the clammy stone, squeezing my eyes shut against the rising shrieks of the damned. "Rise!" A voice called from the depths, resonant and commanding. I opened my eyes just in time to see shadowy tendrils shooting toward me, coiling around my arms and legs like serpents, tightening with an overwhelming grip. I screamed, my voice interrupted by the grotesque laughter of the figures surrounding me, reveling in my despair. "They are hungry," the woman's voice echoed within me, "and your essence, child, is their banquet." As I writhed against the unyielding bonds, my mind began to fracture under the weight of truth and the mockery of lost love swirling around me. I could feel the hollow laughter creeping back, a once familiar sensation now wrought with malice. The altar's heartbeat quickened, its rhythm fueled by my fear. By this tangible connection they clawed for my very essence laid bare before them. The walls began to shift again, opening wider, revealing what lay beyond the tunnel was no longer just a maw, it was a pulsating gateway, intermingling darkness and light into an unholy tapestry. From within came vague whispers, entreating me to step forward, to embrace whatever truths lay there. But what truths awaited? Would they devour me or set me free? As I cast my gaze back toward my mother's apparition, the figures around me darted closer, their skeletal fingers stretching toward my heart like shadows of ghoulish promises. Then, a chilling laughter erupted. The hooded figure raised its head, the glint of something sharp slicing through the gloom. "The darkness reveals all, dear one. Choose, and know that lingering too long here will be your undoing." I locked eyes with the inescapable, witnessing the twisted glee etched onto the faces of the lost souls hungrily awaiting their next feast. I had to decide. But the clock ticked toward my inevitable demise, and as a horrific scream clawed its way from my throat, I felt the walls compress tighter. Would I join those that had already been claimed, or could I break free into the light, no matter the cost? But just as clarity pierced the shroud of chaos, the ground split open beneath me once more, and I fell into the gaping maw of the darkness, praying silently as the abyss pulled me deeper into its hungry embrace. Would I be lost, or was liberation finally within reach? The wretched laughter echoed all around, wrapping me in a veil, drowning my screams in a cacophony of horror, promising the revelation that awaited below. I fell, and the darkness swallowed me whole, an overwhelming tide that threatened to engulf my very essence. As I plummeted, the sensation of freefall dissolved into a shuddering halt. The air around me was cold and unwelcoming, heavy with the scent of decay, and the sound of something scuttling just beyond the reach of my vision sent frost down my spine. I landed on a damp surface, the same fleshy texture that had greeted me moments before. Panic surged through my veins, urgency pulsing with each erratic heartbeat as a shock wave of moisture surged upward, soaking my clothes. My breath came in short gasps, the darkness was profound, and I was utterly alone, or so I thought. Gentle rustling stirred the air, and instinctively, I reached for the opaqueness before me. My fingers brushed against something cold and slick, something unmistakably alive. It jerked away from my touch, and I recoiled, terror pooling in my gut like molten stone. "Don't disturb them," a voice hissed from the shadows. The sound was serpentine, slithering through the marrow of my bones, chilling me to the core. "Who is there?" I managed to whisper, the words echoed back in mocking tones from unseen mouths. Silence draped over me like a heavy shroud, thick with palpable dread. "Those who sleep here do not wish to be awakened," the voice continued, dripping with menace. "And you awaken them merely by breathing." Fear constricted my throat, making it difficult to swallow. I strained to see, but the gloom rebelled against my will. Cleaving through the darkness, a low flicker ignited just ahead. A sick, pulsating glow emanated from a gnarled figure sprawled awkwardly against the wall. It writhed as if caught in a dream that morphed into a nightmare, its face obscured by shadows. "What are you?" I forced out, battling against the clamminess enveloping me. Merely an echo, it replied, its voice an amalgamation of sounds that should have belonged to many but came from one. Yet I feel you, alive and unwelcome. They fear your kind. You carry the scent of their sacrilege. What do you mean? My voice trembled, revulsion splattering across my tongue as I felt the undercurrent of ancient contempt slithering around me. They have altered the world, and in doing so, have twisted the bonds of human understanding, it rasped. You tread upon a ground stained with blood and bondage. It calls to the wretched. They hunger, and you burn as an offering. Before the words fully settled, a chorus of whispers erupted around me, an incoherent mass clamoring for attention, drowning out all rational thought. Faint but unrelenting, they wove tales of sorrow and torment, each story feeding the chaos that thrummed within the cavern. The glow brightened into a lurid hue, revealing the abyssal landscape, a hall lined with figures clad in ragged, rotting skins, their eyes vacant yet pleading. These were not simply faces of anguish from before, they were souls trapped within the fabric of this realm, fused into grotesque carvings of their former selves. Tendrils of shadow weaved through the skin like taunting whispers, and I shrank back as a gnarly hand stretched towards me, beckoning with a torturous intensity. Join us, it croaked, its voice warp and wane with every guttural sound. The priestess waits, and soon she shall provide you the answers you seek. Priestess. I gasped, heart racing. What priestess? Do you wish to know what lies beneath the surface? To understand the shroud that entangles your fate? It crooned, the tone flipping from hallowed conspirator to nightmarish seducer. The shadows swirled with anticipation, closing in around me, and the ground writhed beneath. No. I screamed, the fear bursting forth, but it only seemed to allure the shadows into a frenzy of excitement. They swarmed closer, pulling and taunting, their voices interspersed with sinister laughter that reverberated within the caverns. Let her in. Taste her fears. Welcome the sacrifice. She comes to join the divine. They shrieked, voices harmonizing into a thunderous symphony of madness. With a burst of primal instinct, I tore myself away from the grasping hands, diving deeper into the glistening darkness, desperation urging me forward. I sprinted through the chaos, driven only by the singular hope of finding a path to salvation, or at least an escape from the clutches of the damned. As the shadows clawed at me, my heart drummed like a war cry against the coming night, and from the haze a new figure emerged, a skeletal silhouette draped in a shroud of midnight. Its eyes glowed with brilliantly haunting light, glinting like shards of glass against the pressing dark. Foolish child, it intoned smoothly, an unholy melody rippling from its mouth. You cannot outrun your destiny. Embrace it, or be consumed by it. I skidded to a halt, the air around me thrumming with growing intensity. The ground beneath me trembled violently, soft, pulsing flesh rippling as a monstrous form began to arise, its shape bloated and undulating, engorged by the very air I breathed. Your true test begins now, the skeletal figure intoned. The grotesque mass twisted and churned, revealing a semblance of humanity, distorted faces, reaching hands, joining the cacophony of betrayal and twisted love. Panic rose anew as the walls began to quake, shadows dancing in feverish rhythm. It was not just a chamber, the entire structure was awakening, and I was at its crux, held captive, surrounded by an insatiable hunger for life. In one final burst of clarity, I felt the looming truth. What place was this where grotesque divinity awaited? As the darkness clutched at my ankles, the priestess beckoned me with open arms. Would I join the corrupt or fight against the tide? I took a step forward, uncertainty crashing against resolve, and as the edges of my sight faded, I realized the figure in the shadows was not an ally but an arbiter of doom, awaiting my next move. And just as I turned to run, a scream emerged from the depths, echoing into the darkness as I felt their hunger close around me like the crushing weight of forgotten truths. The walls trembled again, doom reverberating through the bones of the space like the last throes of a dying beast. I stood paralyzed, teetering on the precipice of a choice that felt as if it had already been made for me. A sweet, unnatural promise curled in the air, laced with the stench of desperation and decay that lingered like a parasite. The shadowy priestess loomed closer, her visage painted in stark, striking contrast against the soft glow that surrounded her. The grotesque mass behind her writhed and coiled, a living embodiment of the despair and secrets it had swallowed. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, the truth clawing its way out of my chest like a caged beast. "Will you embrace the lament of those who came before?" She lilted, her voice inflecting a maddening rhythm. "The bond that sickens their skins is the bond of belief. Everything you fear resides in the power of devotion and dread. Get away from me!" I bellowed, stepping back as the consciousness of her followers surged. Those lost souls pulsated like the heartbeat of the cavern itself, their eyes molten with longing that shattered me to pieces, but she only smiled, mouth stretching beyond natural limits, exposing a labyrinth of jagged teeth. "You cannot escape what you are. You were forged in anguish, just as they were. We are attuned, bound by the very essence that will consume your frail mortality." As if orchestrated by a conductor unseen, the stench of rot intensified, curling into tendrils that crept along the ground toward me. Desperation pulled my legs, but instinct forced me to stay, bound by a spell of fate woven tighter around my throat. The tears that blurred my vision transformed into spectral dreams, flickers of laughter and screams merging within the vaporous haze that carpeted the floor. They called to me, not just with words but with familiar faces, twisted and dreadful. I recognized shadows of loved ones, their features grotesquely contorted but hauntingly familiar. "Join us!" they implored, voices harmonizing into a symphony of loss and yearning. "Feel the release. Our sacrifice is but an echo, a means of transcendence." More figures emerged from the darkness, shadows spilling into the luminous despair, the remnants of souls that wandered these halls, seeking a path obscured by the darkness of their own making. I recoiled, stumbling back as they clawed at the air, trying to press through the barrier that separated the resolves of the living and the cries of the dead. "I want to end up like you!" I screamed, my voice lost among their rising cacophony, but my protests fell like shattered glass against stone. Suddenly, a low rumble broke out as the cavern walls convulsed, and the mass of bodies behind the priestess began to shift, revealing not limbs but horrific amalgamations, fused human forms layered onto one another, faces screaming in silent agony. "Look," the priestess whispered, her tone dripping with condescension. "These are your kin, woven together by desperation, by their unwillingness to let go. You see, the flesh is merely a vessel. The human spirit, though, is what binds us all." I stumbled back, fear coiling tightly around my spine as I felt the press of those lost souls against my skin, despair clawing toward me like ravenous beasts. Then came a deafening roar, erupting from the mass, a wave of anguish crashing against my mind. The shadows clawed at my ankles, a dark tide surging forth, dragging me closer, closer to the priestess whose smile twisted more with every passing second. The undulating mass trembled, and the faces began to scream, an orchestra of horror drowning me beneath its waves. "Join us! Join us!" they echoed, voices interweaving in a haunting chorus that in that moment sank the deep-seated knowledge of my dwindling time. If I remained there, if I could not unearth the unpalatable truth, I would become yet another wretched face, another forlorn scream caught in the labyrinth of this hellish domain. No! The battle cries of my defiance rose within me like a flickering flame, a desperate need that surged against the empires of dread. I fought against their grasp, clenching my fists with newfound resolution. But as I turned to flee, an unforgiving scream ripped through the air, so alien, so raw, that a shudder coursed through me, freezing me in place. The priestess reached out, fingers elongated like claws, poised to snatch me into the depths. "Feed the shadows or become one with the darkness," she shrieked, the sound warped into a pitch that set my heart racing. Finally, my legs propelled me forward, a primal instinct urging me to escape the hellish tide that beckoned at my feet. I burst into a narrow corridor, the oppressive atmosphere breaking only to reveal a flickering light at its end. As I stumbled toward it, the ground bucked violently beneath me, the very fabric of this wretched realm tearing apart. A figure blurred toward me in the distance, shimmering with an urgency that awoke hope within my hollow heart. The darkness clung ferociously, latching onto my limbs and dragging me back, but I pressed on. In this split second, I could have sworn I heard the whispered secrets of the damned urging me to turn around, urging me to embrace what awaited behind me, with one last desperate push, I lunged for the light, my fingers grazing the threshold. In a breathless moment, I crossed over and darkness seemed to roar in fury behind me. And just before the light enveloped me, before clarity could consume the shadows clinging to my soul, I dared to look back. The cavernous maw before me opened, releasing a cacophony of anguished howls as my reality warped, and I saw the priestess's sneer tear wide, a haunting visage that declared, "You can run, but the truth will always find you." My heart thudded in my chest in synchrony with the pulse of terror receding into oblivion, but not before one last whisper snaked through my mind, leaving a chill that clawed at my sanity. "The last of your blood will be your greatest betrayal." The light consumed me, yet somehow, my heart knew it was only the beginning. Emerging in a haze of shimmering light, I stumbled forward, gasping for breath as the oppressive weight of the darkness slipped away, replaced by the harsh tang of cold, sterile air. The brightness around me faded as shadows flickered like phantoms, leaving me feeling disoriented and lost. Behind me, the cavern loomed, its whispers of torment fading, yet somehow echoing still within the confines of my mind. "Where am I?" The words slipped from my mouth, shaky and hollow, swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive silence. I blinked against the lingering glow, adjusting to the muted light of an unfamiliar space that mirrored my state of panic. There were no walls in this room, it was just a ghost of a situation, a threshold caught between realities. My fingers trembled as I pressed against an invisible barrier, a shimmering veil that pulsed with energy, remnants of the nightmare I had just fled. The thought of the priestess lingered ominously, her sinister grin carving into my memory. Could she reach me here? As I steadied my breath, shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, tiny tendrils of darkness winding around my legs like mist as I took cautious steps forward. I felt the pulse of that malevolent energy, a distant echo drawing me toward another door painted in peeling gray, sagging at the hinges, as if decaying under the weight of despair that seeped through the cracks. The door creaked open at my touch, revealing a dimly lit passage cluttered with broken furniture and scattered relics of a forgotten existence. Old photographs hung askew on the walls, their edges curling, faces obscured by time's cruel embrace. My heart quickened as a numbness crept into my bones. These were the faces I had only recently seen, twisted and distorted, among the congregation of the cavern. Stepping deeper into this dismal place, I began to hear whispers again, low and mournful, threading through the air and wrapping around my consciousness like a vice. Help us, the voices became insistent, urging me forward, carving paths toward the truth. That I turned a corner, and a gallery stretched before me, a memorial adorned with fragments of lives once lived. Each piece bore a weight of sadness so profound that it felt tangible, suffocating. One photograph caught my eye, a twisted image of a family that seemed all too familiar. Their faces were gaunt, shadows clinging to them, mirroring the horrors I had just escaped. It was my family, and my chest tightened with a sickening dread. That a rustle past a cracked doorway piqued my attention, and instinct drew me closer, curiosity battling against the voice of reason that warned me to flee. Inside, I discovered a room cluttered with waxen figures, the air heavy with a sap-like smell. My stomach lurched as I recognized the figures. They were made from human skin, meticulously crafted into sculptures that mimicked the people I had lost. Heart racing, I stumbled back, shaking my head in disbelief. "No, this can't be real," I gasped, but the figures seemed to quiver in response, their faces contorted in silent screams. It was a macabre tribute, almost divine in its horror, resonating with the echoes of the priestess's words. Just as I turned to leave, a shadow dropped from the ceiling with a grace that defied its grotesque form. It landed before me, a creature wrought of nightmares, a pallid amalgamation fused with human and something else entirely, its skin glistening under the ambient light, veined and bulging with secrets. Hollow eyes scrutinized me, and I felt an oppressive force urging me to listen, to understand the betrayal it embodied. As it reached out, clawed fingers extending toward me, I caught just a glimpse of a reflection in its slick surface, a face, mine, trapped in infinite distortions. The creature's mouth opened in a silence so profound, I felt the world around me still, as though time itself held its breath. "Will you offer yourself?" it rasped. "Will you release the bond of your bloodline to join us in a celebration of eternal lament?" Without waiting for an answer, it lunged forward, drowning me. In a suffocating embrace, the air filled with the intoxicating scent of decay that threatened to take me under. My scream tore through the stillness, echoing against the walls of a dark history I dreaded to unravel, part of me yearning for the embrace of this unholy union. As the darkness swirled, I wrestled for breath, and my fingers grazed the smooth surface of another skin-covered figure beside me. A fleeting pang of recognition smashed into my heart. Hadn't they been a part of my family? Suddenly, the creature pulled back, raising a finger to its lips in a gesture wrought with significance. Time hung in the air again, a thick curtain that promised revelation steeped in blood and betrayal. An echo reverberated in my mind, a haunting resonance that repeated words I hadn't heard but somehow knew. The truth will always find you. Then darkness tightened around me, a night unending, leaving me gasping for what I feared most in a world that was beginning to feel like my own flesh peeling away piece by piece. It was then, mixed with the echo of soft, sinister laughter, that I felt something shift deep within me. My own shadow stirred with purpose, revealing two small glimmering eyes that had been watching me all along. And before I could fully comprehend what I was witnessing, it spoke in a voice that was unmistakably mine. "Join us, you know you want to." In the heart of that grotesque gallery, a creeping dread sank deep, wrapping itself around my very essence. I stood frozen before the waxen figures, the mockery of my family twisted in eternal agony. My throat tightened, each breath drawing in the stench of decay that screamed with memories better left forgotten. My reality was a whirlwind of terror and despair, yet something darker lurked just beneath the surface. The whisper of familiarity, the echo of kinship with these horrors. The creature loomed before me, its pallid skin shimmering disturbingly in the dim light, twisted features locked in an unsettling semblance of a smile. There was an urgency to its gaze, a desperate yearning that sent shards of ice racing down my spine. "Will you offer yourself?" It rasped, its voice a haunting symphony that resonated against the backdrop of my growing horror. "No," I shouted, backing away, adrenaline surging as my mind fought to comprehend. "I am not like you." For a flickering moment, I caught a glimpse of something within the creature's distorted visage. My reflection danced among the grotesque forms, a truth so unbearable that it snagged in my throat. As I stared into those hollow depths, the fleeting recognition clawed at me. This was my lineage, this was the culmination of every ancestral sin whispered through generations, the essence of their sacrifice manifesting before me. My heart raced frantically, pounding in a symphony of anguish echoing through the gallery. I tore my eyes from the nightmare in a desperate bid for clarity. Yet with every step I took toward the door, the chilling whispers rose in volume, merging into a cacophony that rolled over me like an unruly tide. "Join us." My pulse quickened, a primal fear urging my feet to carry me away. But just as I lunged toward freedom, shadows erupted from the corners of the room, billowing outward in dark tendrils that wrapped around me, anchoring me to the floor. "Embrace your truth," the creature beckoned, its clawed fingers reaching out as if coaxing my soul from within. "They are waiting for you. You are one of us, a vessel of eternal lament." "No." I screamed again, feeling the pressure of the darkness pushing against my skin, each word like a stake driving deeper into my heart. "You are not my family." And yet, beneath the surface of my defiance, doubt began to take root. The shadows whispered of connections lost, of bloodlines entwined in guilt and pain. Memories of laughter faded into the silence of flesh being stripped, of former lives engulfed in shadow. My family turned into wretched things, bound by promises made long before I even drew breath. The lure of the familiar tugged insistently, and I felt the pull toward those figures, those faces twisted into macabre forms that mirrored my past. In that agonizing moment, I tore my gaze away from the creature, turning back to the figures. It was their torment I could recognize most, their tales of sorrow clinging to my memory like the aftertaste of despair. My breath caught as I realized was I fleeing from a truth I could not bear to acknowledge. Fragments of my mother's voice swirled around me, clearer now, piercing through the haze of panic. They were lives entwined with mine, a burden of sacrifice that dripped with blood-soaked history. "Join us," the cacophony sang again, stronger now, resonating within my very being like the desolate lullaby of my ancestors. My will faltered, the darkness nipping at my edges, curling around my consciousness. The weight of my lineage pressed upon me, barely restrained rage clawing for release. Suddenly, the understanding crushed over me, sending tremors through my soul. These were not just souls on display, they were reflections of my existence, the dark tapestry woven through the generations. They were the price of knowledge, tangled in rituals that spoke of commitment and anguish that buried us all in its well. The shadows shifted, and a now familiar voice fluttered back my own, joining the others in a haunting chorus. Join us, it can't be undone. With an agonizing scream, I tore through the chains of despair, feeling the shadows fighting against me, the cursed promise pulsing with a hunger that fed on my very essence. The walls shimmered, blurring reality into a maelstrom of anguish. I had been a beacon for their shackled souls, and now I could almost fathom their depth. My truth was kin to their suffering. As the weight of the shadows threatened to crush me entirely, I caught sight of the door again, the slightest glimmer of light escaping through its cracks, like sun spilling through the clouds after a storm. It was my last chance. With a sudden, burning resolve, I surged toward the door, feeling the presence of my ancestors lapping at my heels, shadows snaking around me, the darkness howling with despair. I launched myself forward, thrusting myself through the door, shattering the barrier between light and dark, between life and the abyss. But just as I burst through, I heard the priestess's voice rise above the chaos, chilling me to the core. You can run, but the truth will always find you. The threshold of light enveloped me completely, but in that moment of desperate relief, the lingering truth seeped into my mind, a haunting realization that I hadn't escaped. The essence of what I fled would linger within, a taint in my blood, entwined in my very being. As the light swallowed me whole, leaving behind the echoes of the twisted gallery behind, the final words echoed within my skull: the last of your blood will be your greatest betrayal. And within me, a sliver of dark truth began to unfurl, coiling tighter, whispering of the inevitable and endless cycle, intertwining my heart with the wretched lament of my lineage.